Module 3, Lesson 4, we're going to continue with working with integers on a number line. The objective for today is that you are able to understand that each non-zero integer has an opposite denoted, or in other words, written with a negative and then the number inside your parentheses. Now, this negative actually stands for opposite. So whatever the number may be, so if this is a positive number, this would be the opposite of a positive number equals a negative number. Or this means the opposite of a negative number is a positive number. And I'll do a couple examples below to make sure you understand that. Now, another objective is that you understand opposites are the same distance from 0 on opposite sides of 0. Also, 0 is its own opposite. Vocabulary word we talked about last week, and I just want to remind you of, is that an integer is positive and negative whole numbers. So no fractions, no decimals. Now, you may be asked to show on a number line opposites, and so what you would do is you would do the whole number line and say they asked you to locate the opposite of 4. Well, I'd plot 4, and then I would go all the way across and I'd find negative 4. So negative 4 is the opposite of 4 because it is also 4 units from 0. Or you could say 4 is the opposite of negative 4 because it is 4 units from 0, which is the same. So they're opposites of each other. So if you were to locate 4 and its opposite, you'd have 4 and the opposite was negative 4. Now, if they asked you to find the opposite of 5, then it would look like or be written as this. And so this here tells you to find the opposite of whatever is in there. So the opposite of 5 is 5. Now, a way that it may look a little different is if they ask you to find the opposite of a negative number. So you're going to find the opposite of, let's say, negative 2. So if you were to write it mathematically, the opposite would be that negative. So we use this to denote the negative. And then negative 2 is my number, so that goes inside my parentheses. And so this is saying the opposite of negative 2. So the opposite of negative 2 is positive 2. Negative 2 and positive 2 are both 2 units from 0. 5 and negative 5 are both 5 units from 0. So that's your proof that they are opposites. And this is the mathematical way of writing the words opposite. And we'll do a little bit more with that in the lesson in the book. Go ahead and turn to lesson 4 from module 3 in your book. In the book, we're going to jump down to example 1. So we did the number line on your boards last week, or on the papers last week with the Post-its. So it asks you to locate the number 8 and its opposite on the number line. Explain how they are related to 0. So we're going to locate number 8 first. And then it says locate the opposite of number 8. And I'm going to go all the way over to negative 8. And they're opposites of each other because negative 8 is 8 units to the left of 0. 8 is 8 units to the right of 0. Therefore, the opposites because they are the same distance from 0 on opposite sides. Now, we're going to go down to number 2. Locate and label the opposites of the numbers on the number line. So my number is a 9, and I'm going to find the opposite of 9, which would be a negative 9. And the way that you would denote that, or the way that you would write it, is the opposite of 9 is equal to negative 9. So this is your A. B gives me a negative 2. So the opposite of negative 2, so again, opposite, this is replaced with the word opposite, of negative 2 is a positive 2. So I'm going to go ahead and just put the letters that the numbers were with. And then C is the opposite of 4, which is a -4. And D is the opposite of -7, which is a +7. And that is more or less what we're doing today, but we're going to move into some real-world examples of how to talk about opposites when we aren't just using a number line. So number 3, it says, write the integer, which is a positive or negative whole number, that represents the opposite of each situation. Explain what 0 means in each situation. So 100 feet above sea level, the opposite is 100 feet below sea level. And 0 represents sea level. Now we have 32 degrees Celsius below 0. So the opposite is 32 degrees Celsius above 0. And we don't use Celsius, but every other country in the world uses Celsius. And 0 in Celsius actually represents freezing. So 0 degrees Celsius represents freezing. And a withdrawal of $25, the opposite would be a deposit. Now, if you want to see integer-wise what these numbers look like, 100 feet above sea level would look like just 100. 32 degrees Celsius below 0 would be -32 degrees Celsius. And then a withdrawal of $25 would just be a -$25. Now, in this situation, 0 would be $0. So 0 represents no change in the account. So I think a lot of people would want to say that 0 represents that you don't have any money, but that's not true. In this situation, they're talking about taking away or putting in money. And so 0 would represent if you didn't do anything, if your account stays the same. And so 0 represents no change in your account. This is where we have to really start paying attention to what language they're using, because if they talk with words like withdraw and deposit, it's going to be 0 is going to be wherever you're starting at, not necessarily 0, just a starting point. And we'll work more with it so you become more comfortable at deciphering that. Your second example. Maria decides to take a walk along Central Avenue to purchase a book at the bookstore. On her way, she passes the Furry Friends pet shop and goes in to look for a new leash for her dog. Furry Friends pet shop is 7 blocks west. So this is going to be something we have to remember. 7 blocks west of the bookstore. She leaves Furry Friends pet shop and walks towards the bookstore to look at some books. After she leaves the bookstore, she heads east for 7 blocks and stops at Ray's pet shop to see if she can find a new leash at a better price. Which location, if any, is farthest from Maria while she is at the bookstore? So we have to figure out, when does she start at the bookstore? So she decides to take a walk along Central Avenue to purchase a book. At the bookstore, on her way, she passes the Furry Friends pet shop and goes in to look for a new leash for her dog. Furry Friends pet shop is 7 blocks west of the bookstore. So they're telling you in reference to the bookstore how far it is. That means that they want us to use the bookstore as our starting point, which would be our 0. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just go for the middle here. I'm going to say 0, and this is going to be the bookstore. And again, the only reason bookstore is 0 instead of the Furry Friends is because when they told me the distance from Furry Friends, they said it was 7 blocks west of the bookstore. So they were talking about starting at that bookstore and where you would go. Now, in case you don't know your directions, we need to put a compass on here. So north is up, east is to the right, south is down, and west is to the left. So if it is 7 blocks west, that means I need to go to the left side. And this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, I am putting negative numbers, but again, the negative isn't what the distance is. My negative is just letting me know that I'm going west as opposed to east. Now, over here at -7 on the number line would be Furry Friends Pet Shop, and I'm just going to put Furry Friends. And so she went from the bookstore to here. That's 7 blocks west. Then I'm going to go on to the next thing that she did, and she left there and she went to the bookstore to look at some books. So she went on to the bookstore, looked at some books. After she left the bookstore, she heads east for 7 blocks. So now I need to go to the right 7 blocks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And again, I'm going to the right because east is to the right on the compass. And so she went over here to Ray's Pet Shop. And from the bookstore to Ray's was also 7 blocks. Which location is the farthest from Maria while she's at the bookstore? So your answer would be they both are the same distance. From the bookstore they're opposites of each other. So they are the same distance, just opposite directions. So they're in opposite directions. And in this case, 0 represents the bookstore, which was her original place she was planning on going. She happened just to make another stop. So the main location or a starting point, those sorts of things are what your zeros will begin to represent. All right, I'm going to have you go ahead and complete number 4. At this point, I would like you to pause the video because you are expected to do your problem set on your own. Once you have number 4 completed, you can go ahead and hit play again and check your work. If you have it correct, go ahead and go to your problem set. If you have it incorrect, I'm going to need you to go ahead and do number 5.